but the mechanism we want it to be lower than the fuel metering jet.
Okay, let's run that by me again. Question is.
So we want the fuel level to be level
Fuel level to be level.
with the metering jet there.
No, metering jet's down here. We don't care where that is.
I mean the
Discharge nozzle?
Yes.
Just
excuse me.
below the discharge, just below the holes.
Okay. And then is that the same thing as what we were talking about, the float mechanism?
This is the float mechanism here. The seat, the
Okay.
needle, the arm, and the float.
We want that to be lower than
No, we don't care where that is.
lower than the outlet.
Doesn't matter where that is.
Okay.
Just is where it is, so that it works.
Okay. So I can cross that out. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that's what we wrote on the note.
Other question?
Level must be maintained slightly. The fuel level must be fuel.
Okay. Thank you.
Fuel level must be maintained slightly lower than the. Yes.
If you're actually measuring liquid in the float chamber,
Yes.
would a level be required in your tool kit?
Yes.
So is that as part of the process?
Yes.
Secondly, are you using fuel as the liquid or?
No. It specifies exactly what they want you to use, what specific gravity fluid that you're supposed to use.
Is it an anonymous fluid or we're coming to that?
I don't remember the book. We're using Stoddard solvent here.
Okay.
Um,
I was just wondering, things like alcohol is about the third of surface tension of water. So
but remember, that's only going to be applicable to the old Marvel Schebler. Dang it. The old Stromburg. When you get into the Sheblers, you don't use any fluid because it's done with a drill bit. Then you can actually run fuel in and see the level. If I'm not mistaken, it's fuel. So, not a big deal. It's whatever the book is. I don't remember what it is offhand. Where am I? Okay. Fuel level is critical. Too low. If the fuel level in the bowl is too low, it's going to run rich or lean. Lean. Everybody should be like lean, right? Because it's too low in the discharge nozzle and you need more suction to drag it out. So it's going to run too lean. So if it's too high, it's going to run rich and also dribble on the floor probably. All right, let me see. I have like 2 pages of measuring the fuel levels, the float level, which I'm not going to draw this because I just told you. Let's see, measuring that. All right, point C. We have the throttle plate. Throttle plate is a butterfly type valve. It used to be a caterpillar. So when it's closed, that restricts the air. And that is in the idle position. When it's open, that would be yeah, when it's it's obviously have intermediate positions. So it goes from closed. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, there's not full open, mid-range, all the way open, all these different. I guess the thing would be open is fast. All right. It's not idle. Yeah, it goes fast. All right, let's go over here. There's more I could say about that, so I will. the throttle plate, I'm trying to decide where to go with this. Okay, so you do have idle. Obviously, idle's mostly all the way closed. You'd be surprised how close it is, and it's like, wow, hardly any air gets through there, and really hardly any air does. And so on top of the throttle plate, you have a massive amount of suction, which is then going to work through the idle circuit and pull fuel out of the idle discharge nozzles and up. You have this transition period or positions where the butterfly valve starts to open up. And as it does, and I'll draw this in, hopefully I can make it work here with my drawing and show you that it has different positions where it will draw out of different nozzles and do different things. So a lot of it happens with the idle circuit. Be on the lookout though you need to know when you're doing your oral what every single hole in the carburetor does. If there's a hole and you don't know what it does, don't come up for an oral, because you're going to be going away. You should know what every single hole does, because it's really not that difficult to kind of figure out. Is it air or is it fuel? It's all it can be, air or fuel. If it's fuel, then what's it doing? Why is it coming out of that? If it's air, what's it doing? Why is it coming out of that? And it's not hard to figure out once you get through all of this. It's like it's only going to have a couple of different purposes. All right, so let's talk about the idle circuit. So when this butterfly valve up here is closed, probably didn't draw it real well here for our purposes. Let's see if I can fix this a little bit. All right, so we'll kind of make the throttle body going up like this. This is where it gets hard to try and integrate all this together. And we'll make this go like that. All right, so far so good. There's the twisty part. And of course, it's going to open up this way. All right, so when that's closed, we don't have enough air flowing through here for this to work. So we've got no idle. And unfortunately, yes, it's too tall around. So let's see what I can do, if I can make this work out. You have to help me out here and pretend a little bit. See if we can do it. All right. Because this is in the way. You know what we can do? We can move that. There we go. Well, let's move that over here. And what is this again over here? Main air bleed. All right. And what's on top of the main air bleed? Right here. What is that? Right, main metering jet. Main metering jet. Jet is, in this sense, is another word for orifice. So main metering jet. Main air bleed over here. All right. So this is not going to work at all for our purposes. I have other changes I wish to make. I think I can do this. I think I can do it. Do it like that. Yeesh. All right. So what we do is we have to add an idle circuit. And this is where you're going to have to kind of just work with me on this one because it's hard to draw. All right. So off of this, what we can do is we could run a passageway. And really, it's got to kind of, we'll just do it like this. Run a little passageway. Run it up here. That's where the problem is. I made it too tall, but you can go with me. And we are going to go like that. And maybe we'll go like this. There we go. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. And we'll put one more in there. So there. Now this is the idle circuit right here. And so I've made 3 idle discharge nozzles, if you will. And in one of them, we'll put a little screw. I'll just kind of represent it like this. That allows us to, and I can't really draw it nicely, draws us to draw a little needle right there so we can control the amount of fuel that goes through there. So in idle, we have a very big vacuum right here. You see, a big vacuum up here, right? And so it has just got all kinds of suction. And so what it's going to do, and this is too tall, but normally it would be, it goes above it. So we've got fuel and this suction, and so fuel is going to come out this way, and a little bit right there. That's how we control our mixture, and fuel is going out that way. And we have to give it a little air bleed. So let me see, above the level of fuel, we can just go behind the venturi. We can go like that. Now we've got air behind this venturi, gets sucked into here, and we got a little bit of air in here. So we got our emulsification is working, and there we go. So right there, what we've got is a nice idle circuit going. We've got fuel being sucked up from the main discharge nozzle down below the main discharge nozzle. While we are in idle, by the way, this is all going to be full of fuel because nothing's happening there. So this is just all fuel. That's fuel, and it's going to suck the fuel out from the main, on the other side of the main jet, main metering jet, but that doesn't matter because it's such a small amount of fuel. Main metering jet doesn't even look like it's there to this. So we got all this happening right here. It's coming up, and our fuel is going out like that. Well, I drew for purpose here a third discharge nozzle in the idle circuit, but you can see it's below the butterfly valve. So what kind of pressure do we have below the throttle valve?
High pressure?
It's high pressure. So is fuel going to come out of that?
No.
Nope. It's going to suck in air. So it's actually going to act as an air bleed right now, an auxiliary air bleed. And that is going to be air bleeding up into there. We have our other air bleed right there. So we've got two air bleeds going. Well, in just a little bit, we're going to transition this out, and we're going to open up our throttle valve some. So that now it's open a little bit more. And when it gets open, that auxiliary, well, first of all, got more air coming through, right? If you got more air coming through, what do you need more of?
Fuel.
You need more fuel. So now that this is open, we got a third discharge nozzle. Third discharge nozzle is adding more fuel. That keeps it from going ultra lean as we transition from idle into our transition period. So transitions through the transition period. Yeah, that sounded great. And so if we open it up just a little bit more, we're going to start getting air flowing past here, and we're going to start getting some fuel coming out of here. And then at a certain point, this will open up enough that this is not much of a vacuum anymore. I mean, it's still low pressure, but at that point, all this goes away. And it no longer draws fuel out. All the fuel backs down into here. So this just becomes an empty tube. As soon as fuel starts to flow out of the discharge nozzle, all of this fuel right here gets sucked up in the discharge nozzle and out. Which, by the way, did that make it go rich or lean?
Rich.
Made it go rich. So that is what's, and they will actually, they makes these a little bit fatter sometimes in here. And so when this discharge nozzle is off, all of this is filled full of fuel. So when I accelerate, we get all of this fuel that's in all these little nooks and crannies gets sucked out suddenly. And you would think that it would go rich, but the problem is we open the butterfly valve up, air starts flowing faster than the carburetor can really compensate. So all that extra fuel just dumps in with all the extra air. That's an acceleration system. And then the carburetor tends to catch up. So you have to give it an extra shot of fuel to start with that burst of air. Then the carburetor catches up. We call that acceleration system, which I'll talk more about. But that that's how that works. So the idle system is really very simple. It's just a tube with the 1, 2, or, well, usually 2 or 3 different passages. So back on idle, go back to idle. Can I do that? Let me see. Do the magic of that. All right, we're back at idle. Your job as a mechanic is, number one, be able to put a carburetor on and off and adjust it, put all the linkage together properly, which is a whole other thing, and adjust the carburetor. What are the 2 adjustments that you are always going to be setting? Idle speed and idle mixture. All right, so we're running this aircraft, and we are in what position? Idle or off idle? Idle. So we're going to adjust what 2 things? And we're going to do that in what position on the carburetor? In idle circuit or off idle?
Idle circuit.
In the idle. If you're off idle, it won't work. It won't do anything for you. All right, so we got to have it in idle. All right, and like I said, the first thing I like to do is take the idle speed and do what with it?
Lucky? Set it
The idle speed screw? Get rid of it.
all the way out.
Oh, it's this screw right here. You can see it's just a screw. It's not going to anything. It's just the throttle. There, it's just a screw right there that just stops it. That's all it does. Wide open, stop. So if this is going to hold the butterfly valve in a very particular position, and figures it. Get that off. And so as we screw it out, it will close the butterfly valve more, and the engine will do what? Faster or slower? Slower. And if I screw it in, it makes it go towards wide open throttle, and it just makes it go faster and faster and faster. All right. So on a brand new carburetor install, I usually just back it. I just get out of my way, and it's connected in the cockpit. So I'll just get in the cockpit, start up the aircraft, warm it up, and I don't need the throttle stop. If it idles too slow, just push the throttle in a little bit. I'm sitting right there, just pushing a little bit. And they have locks on them, so you can lock it in little screw locks on the throttle, so you can put it where you want it, lock it in. The throttle's not going anywhere, right? It's not like a car. We don't fly around with our hand on the throttle all the time. You know, if I let go, it just goes to idle. The plane goes down. You can't drink beer that way. So, and most airplanes don't have beer cup holders, so you anyway. It's I'm in trouble. Okay.
This is reasons that was an airport.
We're being taught how to dress all the This one cigar lighter.
Okay. So I like to just get this out of the way because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to set up a carburetor. You're warming up the airplane and it won't idle below 1,000 RPM. Well, it's obnoxious. So just get this out of the way. Control the idle speed with the throttle in the cockpit. So I'm running the airplane, right? Because that does this. Everybody follow me so far? And we warm it up, and I bring the throttle in the airplane back, and I can bring it right back to about 600. I like that, 550, 600, wherever it feels good to idle. And so I bring it around, say 550. Now what's the very next thing I'm going to do to check idle mixture?
Cut it off.
Idle cutoff. Reach for the red knob, pull it back, and it's going to die. Now will it die on the Strombergs? Nope. This has got a different style of cutoff. It actually is a valve that will shut the fuel off. It shuts it off like, let's say right here. No fuel goes through. So then what happens is whatever fuel is right here gets used up, dies. So I pull it back, and I think I've covered this up. Yeah, a little bit. So I pull it back. What should I see?
Increase 50 RPM.
Slight increase in RPM because I went from a little too rich to best power to dead, right? Okay, so I pull it back and I don't get any rise at all. Is it too rich, too lean, or just right? Too lean. Here's the idle mixture screw. Now, right on there, it says L and R, which stands for left and right.
Lean and rich.
I mean, lean and rich. That's actually one of my oral questions. Why does that screw say left and right on it?
Lean and
And you're
rich.
supposed to say, it does.
I don't know. Maybe this is the one class, by the way, where I guess I'm overthinking it like every other oral. So I guess I'm overthinking it. And then I'm going to say,
Yes.
You are.
you're underthinking it. I heard not that long ago, I mean, it was since my last class, somebody said something like, if you can't explain it in simple terms, you don't understand it. I'm like, ooh, that's really true, because if I can't explain it in simple terms, it means I don't understand. So if you can't explain it in simple terms, you don't understand it. Don't say you're overthinking it. All right, just a little tidbit there. All right, so no RPM rise, therefore it's running to
Lean.
left, lean, to lean. So it's running too lean, so what do I have to do?
Turn it
I have
rich.
to
Turn it.
richen it a little bit. There's an L and an R there. Turn it towards the R, which by the way is going to be, I don't have to look, unscrewing it because there's a needle in there. And when I unscrew it, that little needle that's right up in here opens up more. And so what happens here?
More flex, more fuel.
More fuel comes out. So I give it, well, you know, I'm overzealous. So I give it two full turns out and try it again. And we pull the mixture back, and it's, well, first of all, it didn't really want to idle too well. I'd really mess with it. And then I pull it back, and it goes from 550 to 750 and then dies. So what did I do?
Too rich.
Really a lot of, okay, so we're going to screw it back in until we get a rise of about 50 RPMs. Okay, so I can do all that from the cockpit. Well, I have to shut it off, have somebody adjust that. Then, when it's it's idling, 50 RPM rise, I can then set the throttle. I'm in the cockpit, right where I want it, and it's idling right there, and I want 550, let's say. And by the way, that's just a number. Some people in airplanes want to go a little faster than that, some a little slower, it just depends. So I'm just picking a number. So now I'll say 600, just so you know that. So I want it to idle at 600. I can set inside right at 600, lock it, reach over, pull the mixture back out. I should see
Slight rise in RPM.
how much?
50 RPM.
50, 75, and the engine's now dead. Turn off the key, tell the guy outside, go ahead and set the idle speed. And so I've locked it so this shaft is no longer moving because it's locked in the cockpit, and all my buddy has to do is turn this screw in right up until it just barely touches that throttle shaft right there, and that's going to be, then he gets out of the way, she gets out of the way, start it up, gets a little throttle, pull it back, boom, idle's right where I want it. I'm done. And by the way, just for a matter of actually how things are done, when I'm doing that in an airplane, often I won't shut it down all the way. I'll pull it, I'll see the rise and push it right back in and keep it running if I didn't need to shut it down. So you can do that. But on any carburetor, before you ever make an adjustment, you got to clear it out. So you got to run the RPM up and, you know, let it run for a second, clear it out real good, then pull it back to make sure everything is nice and stable. It wasn't just running super rich and something. So, all right. Wow, that was kind of easy for me anyway. Got the idle circuit. Oh, I know why it was easy, because we're missing a bunch of stuff. Okay. Those are two circuits. It doesn't get a whole lot harder than that. So idle circuit, let me see. Gosh, I can write a million notes if you want. Let me see, idle circuit. Let's see, when throttle is closed, idle position, very little air is flowing and the venturi is ineffective, thus the need for an idle circuit. So let's see, when throttle is closed, very little air flows through the venturi. So venturi is ineffective or not working. Therefore, I'll put so, An idle circuit is needed. All right, we want about a 50 to 75 RPM rise in our mixture. So we're running rich best power. And then once the engine is running, what are you supposed to do with that mixture? In idle?
Oh, it's like lean it out.
Lean it out, aggressively lean. Well, then why didn't we make it rich to begin with? Wouldn't it be better just to aggressively lean it with this little thing right here? Tell the pilot you're good to go, you don't have to worry about it because it's just idle. Why are we making it so stinking rich? Because we don't have a choke. A choke is something that we use to start gas engines, I guess. Car doesn't have one, I don't think. Lawnmowers, the tug that you use to pull the airplane out of the hangar. And a choke is really nothing more than a secondary butterfly that closes off even more air, makes it even more rich. Let me see. Sadly, they didn't get into it at Rotax about the inside of the carburetors. They just did like a minute and enough for me to drawing real quick. I'm like, oh wow, it's got a compensating diaphragm, this and that goes here. But it also has a secondary carburetor stuck onto the side. So it's got a start carburetor. They call it a choke, but it's really a start carburetor, which just adds a bunch more fuel in. But anyway, so yeah, just don't forget that. Let me see. So when the throttle is closed, yeah.
What's the word you have after Venturi? So Venturi is what?
Ineffective. I-N-E. Yeah. Well, it's not your fault. I'm the one scribbling.
Sounds like middle drive.
When throttle plate is closed, piston displacement. I did what in my cup? Thank you for that. Let's see, piston displacement creates a low pressure or vacuum above the throttle plate. This vacuum draws fuel out from the idle discharge tubes. Tube or tubes. All right, so the idle system contains parts. What parts do we have? What did we talk about?
Idle tube.
Okay, idle discharge nozzles. Usually just drilled passages. There's nothing fancy about them. Could have several passages. And they're attached to the tube. So idle metering, let me see, idle discharge nozzles, let me see. How do I want to put this? So we had some that could be above the throttle plate and some that could be below. So if it's below throttle plate, so put this above plate, that's a discharge nozzle. And below the plate, that's going to be a what? Auxiliary bleed. So it's going to act as an air bleed. Is it always going to be an air bleed?
No.
Nope, because a little bit for now, it's really going to be
Discharge.
discharge nozzle. All right.
I need to ask you about your nomenclature here.
Yes.
talking about above and below throttle plates.
Okay.
To me, below throttle plates is between the carburetor and the engine. So in this case, we're talking,
Well, that's why I hesitated.
Or it's an updraft.
It's
right.
well, I know what you're saying, but that's why I hesitated when I was saying, because it's like, well, is it really below it? It's kind of next to it.
If we move this to a side draft carburetor, the nomenclature should be the same. It's below the throttle plate is going to be between the carburetor and the engine.
I'm using the terminology that would be a position of an updraft carburetor. So that would be everything drawn here, the discharge nozzle. This is all below the throttle plate.
It was just going to confuse people. It doesn't, you're saying it applies this way to this configuration.
Yes.
But there are different configurations.
There are.
My
So-
nomenclature applies to all.
Yes. So what would you say?
Below the throttle plate is between the throttle plate and the engine.
Okay. And I see your point.
Upstream and downstream.
Yeah, I know.
Either above or below.
But in our world, and I don't want to. So you follow what he's saying, and he's not wrong, because technically speaking, when you're talking about a carburetor, so many carburetors are downdraft that everything is reversed, and so this up here is technically called below the throttle plate, because it's throttle plate to engine.
The airstream does that.
But I'm referring to it as above the throttle plate because it's physically above it. So I'm looking for a word that would make everybody happy, because if I called this up here below the throttle plate, it would work for you. Everybody else would, why'd you say that? So I was looking for a word here. Thankfully, I probably will stop doing this in a second.
It confuses me, everybody else.
It's all that matters.
Yes.
Would that middle, would that middle vent be part of the suction during off idle that goes into the vent channel?
No. During off idle, all of these are pretty much out of play.
Okay.
That's because there's so much suction, it just cleaned it out.
You lose the suction here.
So it then starts going
It
through
becomes
the-
less and less of a vacuum as it gets closer and closer to atmospheric pressure. So as this butterfly valve opens up,
Yes.
then the pressure starts to equalize between the discharge nozzle area and this side of.
That's another thing in automotive application, that second idle port would be called an off idle port. You have an idle port and an off idle port, and then it goes to.
They don't even give us names for this. It's just like they're there, and half this I had to figure out myself. So, all right. Back to, did that help you back there at all, or do we get it?
Yeah.
Okay. What's that?
He was just asking about like, cause you haven't gone over like the mixture control?
No.
That has like the suction hole.
Yeah, I have not done that yet.
Yeah, he was thinking of that with the idle holes.
Got it. Okay, yeah, we haven't got over that yet. We're getting there. Okay, so yeah. All right. Let's see. Idle metering jet. Let me see. Idle control system. Let me see. Idle metering. Yes, there's still idle metering jet. I forgot to put that in here. Still have an idle metering jet, which we can put right down here. It's right. It's part of the tube in your Stromburg. I mean, you just pull out that little tube, and it's right there at the very end. And because the tube's sort of integrated into here, so we have an idle metering jet. Let me see. Idle mixture adjustment. We went over all of that.
It's the restricted side of the tube, the part that screws in.
Mhm.
It's-
Always. So you pull out the tube. It's like, well, where's the jet? It's always the smallest thing.
Yeah, there's a-
Whatever's the smallest, that's the jet. All right. How far out do we turn the this for initial adjustment? 1 1/2 turns. Out. Is out okay? I'm just kidding. Out is.
Anti-clockwise.
All right, and we're going to be very, very careful when we screw this in because you guys are all so strong and you go to the gym every night and you don't torque. It just, little tiny. When it stops, that's it. Done. Because when you pull out that jet, it really sucks when you see it and it's got a crease all the way around it where it's been shoved in so hard. Then you have to buy a new one. That was not bad. So, yeah, just a tiny little needle. So, doesn't take much to damage it. No damage it.
Kevin?
Yeah.
That idle mixture screw,
Mhm.
it only blocks one of the passages?
Yes.
The other ones are always open?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's enough because if you can cut out 50% of the fuel with that,
I see.
and that's a lot for what little that we're working with here. All right. Mixture control stuff. Economizer.
Kevin, when you drew the idle air bleed,
Uh-huh.
is that that air, does that come from the venturi?
See how it's behind the venturi?
Yeah,
Yeah, that means it's atmospheric. It's hidden back behind there,
so it's not from the venturi.
not from the venturi.
Okay,
Then be pulling it out.
right.
But
Even
is
though
there
there's-
space in between the wall and the venturi? Is that how it gets in there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A lot of space.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
No, I'm mixing carburetors up a little bit here. I'm gonna get this one
Okay.
here. That one may be a little bit different. It's just kind of in general. Although, no, they actually. Oh, that fell out. Thanks. Okay. I think I'm going to jump over to something else here. Mixture control system. This is really going to screw things up. Let's not screw it up. Let's just go with the line. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to it. All right. Carburetors sometimes have, I was going to say need, but that's not true. They kind of do. They have accelerating systems. Now, most of you all are too young to know, but back in the day, you'd get in the car and you'd pump the accelerator a couple of times, right? My kids look at me weird because we have a boat with a carburetor and I pump it a couple times and then start it. They don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's like, well, yeah. And of course they never ask. They don't care. Just start the boat so we can go. But carburetors and cars had accelerator pumps. It's literally a plunger pump. It would, every time you'd accelerate, it pushes the plunger down. There's this little well of fuel, like a piston driving it in there, and there'd be a little jet that would come. Well, from us it goes up, car goes down, and every time you did that, it would squirt gas down into the engine. And then you'd let back up on the gas pedal, and the plunger would come back up, draw in more fuel, and you'd pump again and push more in there. And we have the same thing on some of our carburetors, where when you accelerate, it pushes a little plunger down and it shoots an extra jet of fuel up into the carburetor, because when you open the throttle valve, we don't open things very quickly in aviation, but when you do, and it could happen if you're coming in for a landing, let me back up. You're always supposed to move things in aviation very slowly. We don't jam throttles. We don't, vroom, vroom. Everything is nice and easy. Remember, we've got those swinging pendulum weights on a lot of engines. We got a big old prop out there. We got a lot of money we're messing with here. And so everything is nice and smooth, right? Takes a little while to get to full throttle. You don't do it right away. But you're coming in for a landing, and a kid in a big wheel goes running across the runway or something. I mean, you get excited. You jam that throttle, and you don't need the engine to die at that point. It's got to go. So you've got the accelerator pump. You've opened the throttle valve suddenly and rapidly. This big gulp of air comes through, and the engine otherwise would just go super lean. And when it goes, going to backfire because it went so lean. We don't want that. So you open the throttle valve rapidly. It pushes this plunger down. There's a secondary jet in there, squirts fuel right up into the engine, and it gets an extra shot of fuel to match the air, and away we go. So that's one type of accelerating system. Another type is, which I just showed you, is the well system, where you just have a whole bunch of space around the throttle, the discharge nozzle, that will have fuel in it when it's in the idle circuit. Now, unfortunately, if you're flowing along at mid-throttle, this is all air, and then you jam it forward, you have no extra fuel. It was just air to begin. It's air, and it's going to stay air. But if we go to idle, this will all fill up full of fuel. So in theory, when we're landing, we're back at idle. This will all fill full of fuel. We jam the throttle like crazy. It's going to empty out this well, and everything that's in the air bleed system will come pouring out into the engine, and that helps with our sudden richness and kind of keeps it going.
That's
So.
the well system?
The well system. So you're going to have one of two types. You're going to have the accelerating well, or you're going to have the,
Secondary jet?
I call it the injection pump.
Injection pump.
Yeah. What am I going to call it? I just call it the accelerator. No. Accelerating pump, yeah, that's what I call it. So, all right, well, I can hear by the time clock clicking away that